What I'll tell you also around President Cyril Ramaphosa is that he is expected at some point to speak following a meeting of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. And I think that's one of the things that we've been watching to see whether we will get some word again from the president in the wake of the recent developments in the country and the call for the deployment of the SANDF. I suppose he'll be speaking wearing his hat as ANC president, but nothing stops him from slipping in messages about what has been happening from the perspective of the government that he leads. Let me take you to this now and try and give you more insights into some of the behavior that we've been seeing. And as you've seen, our reporters have been bringing you live visuals of the widespread looting in parts of KZN and Gauteng, and it's not an uncommon sight during violent protests. But let's consider it from a broader perspective. South Africans have been struggling from rising costs in rates to food, to petrol, and even electricity. Not a justification by any stretch of the imagination. But many say they are simply not coping. So have these violent protests and looting been brewing with people being frustrated at unemployment and poverty? Let's discuss this with industrial psychologist Bulelwa Rulashe. Thank you for joining me, ma'am, and sharing your insights with me. From your profession and studying human behavior, when you see the kind of looting and destruction of property, the mob behavior that we have seen, the, scorched earth approach that some have taken, and the zeal and excitement of youth, some members of the youth in taking part in some of this, what goes through your mind?
Thank you very much, and thanks for this opportunity. I think you put it so well when you talk about the excitement of the youth. I think what people are missing in this whole thing is that the youth watching the kind of behavior that's going on around the country, children are very impressionable, right? Remember some of the people who are seen on TV running around, taking property, taking stuff that doesn't belong to them, smashing property. Those people come from homes, right? So there are children who are watching their brothers, their sisters, their uncles, their aunts who are involved in this chaos. And because children are impressionable, children will not necessarily listen to what you say, they'll watch what you do. So there's a part of this that is being internalized, and that's going to be a bigger problem for us in 3, 5, and even 10 years from now. Because that youth watching this, a part of what they're seeing that is made to be correct, even though it's bizarre, that is what is going to play out. So I can also touch on the fact that we can't run away from the reality of poverty. A lot of people are driven by poverty in how they're responding to this. If you think about it, there was a clip this morning where people were even stealing coffins. Who steals a coffin? What are you going to do with a coffin? So there's criminality in all of this. There's poverty that is driving this. There's other behaviors that are driving this, because I see you do the wrong thing that I've been dying to do, and suddenly I can do it. So it's far bigger than what it looks like.
Sure. So are we stuck in a bit of a vicious cycle then? Because from what you just said, I imagine that the people who are active now in the looting, if we follow what you just said, they may have been observing the kind of violence that accompanies our protests, a few years ago, and now they are modeling for future generations. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, is it not?
That's exactly where I'm going to, because if you think about it, some of those people, they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. Some of those people are not necessarily even driven by poverty. Some of those people, it's strictly criminality. But remember, way back then, we made violence a norm. We made it okay. Anytime people were not happy about something, the go-to place was violence. Because it was like, if you can't hear me when I speak, then I'm going to act it out. And the only thing that we had at our disposal were the guns and everything else that went with it. So part of what we're seeing, it's what people have seen being done. And it was the only way that they were listened to or their parents were listened to. Guess what? I've seen it work way back then. So I tell myself, this is the only way that it will work even in future. So I do what I've seen, and I'm trusting and not even thinking about the fact that those who are watching me are going to do the same thing 3, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And so it is that vicious cycle that we're dealing with.
So how do we break this cycle of violence that we are in, ma'am? Do we emphasize issues around punishment and all the theories of punishment that perhaps when people see the kind of behavior we are seeing now being punished, they will be discouraged from taking part in it in the future and perhaps in the medium to long term when we establish a culture of punishment? Or does the key lie in addressing some of the underlying socio-economic conditions that have made it to have this fertile ground for legions of people to take part in looting and violence?
We definitely have to start with addressing the socio-economic problems that we've got as a country. Think about it this way. Human beings naturally fight to survive, right? So take a simple example. If you were standing in front of me and I did this in your face, you naturally blink, right? You don't think about, oh, I'm going to blink. So human survival is about, human beings naturally fight to survive. So what is happening right now that's bound to be a cycle, because if we don't address the real issues, which is, it is the poverty. There are education issues that we're dealing with. There's infrastructure issues that we're dealing with. There's health issues that we're dealing with. If we don't look at the root cause of the problems that are playing out today, we are guaranteed to go down very badly, worse than we've seen Zimbabwe. Forgive me for quoting them, but worse than what we've seen continuing or happening in Zimbabwe. We are bound to be in a far worse situation because we're making it okay. We're continuing to make violence okay, right? And back to the point around survival. So if people don't learn that the only way I will survive, I have to do something about it for myself today. And that teaches my children to do the same thing. And that teaches their children to do the same thing. We're bound to go to a space where people tell themselves the only way I will survive is if the government does something to me. When the government fails me, what happens? I go into violence. And so it just continues to be a very painful, self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not going to end until we can take the time to have the conversations that need to be had. Think about it this way. The very person, at the root of this, if we are to be honest, who is our former president, right? At some stage, he said he was ready to face the courts. He didn't. He said he was ready to go to jail. He wasn't. So there are some of the people who are actually looking at this man who has been their role model, who is their role model even now, continuing to do the wrong things. And when he is being made to pay for what he has done, what happens? There's chaos. So this is bound to happen again if we don't have the conversations that need to be had. And the time is now. Yeah. The time for our government to put a stop to this and to make things happen differently, it is now, painful as it is.
Thank you for your time there, Bulelwa Rulashe, who is an industrial psychologist, and thank you for your insights there, weighing in from one perspective for us to understand some of what we are observing on the streets in various parts of the country, especially in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng. We call this program All Angles, and we do endeavor to bring you all the angles. Let me start here then before I tell you what I'm about to tell you. We did not report this, the news that you will have heard from former statistician General, that is Padile Hutla. He then clarified towards the end of the interview. I gave him the opportunity for him to clarify what his source was as to the news relating to the Zuma family. For the sake of completion, right? For the sake of completion, he did say what he said on this show at the start of our interview, and I owe it to you, for the sake of completion, to reflect for you what has come through from the J.J. Zuma Foundation. The J.J. Zuma Foundation saying in the last while, "Dear all, Following media inquiries, the foundation checked with the family and can confirm that the rumor about First Lady Makhumalo having passed on is devoid of truth. Is devoid of truth is the word from the JG Zuma Foundation. Let me read it again because I don't want to be accused of reporting fake news. We did not report it. Our teams checked with their sources. We gave Dr. Pade Lehutla the opportunity to just say a word, and he did clarify what his source was when he was reacting and what his disposition was as a human being before making those comments. The JG Zuma Foundation says, "Dear all, following media inquiries, the foundation checked with the family and can confirm that the rumor about First Lady Makhumalo having passed on is devoid of truth." That came through around 12 o'clock. Coming through from the JG Zuma Foundation there.